of all, I'd like to thank everybody who is joining us or continuing to join us. We're going to start on time. Early's on time too. I would like to begin by introducing our esteemed panel. I'll introduce myself. My name is Andrew Gardiner. I work for the Hierarchy. I help employers with their hiring challenges. Sometimes it's a technology challenge, sometimes it's a branding challenge, sometimes it's a strategy challenge. But I learn a lot from working with and for the esteemed panel, helping solve their unique challenges, and they're all a little bit different. One of the things I really love about these sorts of panels and opportunities is I joke around, but the panelists that you're about to meet are the people that are kind of behind the curtain in that big, ivory tower that you want to get their attention or send your stuff to, that you know they exist. You've seen their footprints. You saw a picture of them crossing the stream, but you didn't get to meet them. Well, now you get to meet them. And so with that, I would like to, and my trusty colleague, Beverly, who's helping with the chat, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll try to get to them as promptly as possible. The format of the panel is, how do you stand out with your career search? And then we'll probably give it a COVID slant, since that's obviously impacted how companies engage with candidates in a pretty significant way. So with that, I would like to introduce the panel, and Amit, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everybody. My name is Amit Pandya. I'm the current global head of talent acquisition at Couchbase. It's a database, a software company that's headquartered in Santa Clara, but with offices everywhere. My background comes from musical theater and dance to law, to personal and executive coaching, and then here in talent acquisition. Really, I mean, I'm such a fan of when someone finds a role or a position or meaning in their life that they feel passionate about, that somehow brings everything together. And I'm here to help you do it insofar as I can.
Thanks, Amit. David?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is David Moore. I lead the global recruiting team at a company called Box. It's a SaaS company. We focus on cloud content management. And if anyone wants to know more, I can bore them later. But yeah, my journey, I've always been in recruiting ever since I left college. It's an awesome career that's taken me around the world. I initially started in staffing firms in London and Hong Kong before moving to Singapore, and I've worked at a lot of large tech companies, including Apple and Google, before coming to Box. So yeah, really happy and delighted to be here with everyone today. Happy to share whatever experience and anecdotes I have and see if we can be useful to you all.
Thank you, David. Phil, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. My name is Phil Haynes. I am currently the head of global talent acquisition at Zoom Video Communications. I have, like David, been in recruiting since the dawn of time. Like to tell my millennial staff that I actually recruited before the internet, and they can't wrap their minds around that we actually did this craft and helped people get jobs way before you did it electronically. So I'm honored to be part of this panel with everybody here, and just looking forward to helping in any way that I can to help you stand out in your job search, whether it's by phone or by video.
Thanks, Phil. Sam?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Scully, and I own my own boutique, little firm and staff. And I've been in the business, I'll say, ever since I was maybe about 3. I started organizing and wanted to help people, be successful. And my mom used to like to call me a full-time temp, because my first consulting job was at this company called Snelling and Snelling, and they were a temporary firm. And so I was like, oh, okay, I like this. And so once I graduated college and IBM and Microsoft didn't hire me, I said, let me hire my own company. And so that was the beginning of Indigo Staffing, now Sam Scully Staffing. And so my goal is to share my knowledge from being a consultant forever, and I still am, to jumping on the other side, what it takes to be that top person. And with that, I'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. So, esteemed panel, one of the things, this is our second one today, so I've gotten my skids greased. So one of the things that came up, and I'd love to start here, is I have 2 kids that are just graduated from college fairly recently, and they're entering the workforce. And as many of you probably too get asked often about, how do you stand out? What's the secret? Or can you help me? And the first thing I'd like to talk about or ask you guys is, I always say, hey, being good at getting a job isn't something you want to be good at. It's good that you're bad at it, right? It's like being good at dating. You don't want to be good at dating. You just want a boyfriend or a girlfriend. So this is that. So it's good that you're not good at it. Let's start there. That being said, my kids have just joined the workforce, or trying to join it, and it's changed considerably since COVID. So what are some key elements that stand out to you guys as to how the search has changed? If you were a candidate, how would you position yourself, or how would you approach this? Just basically, essentially, but also with the slant of, hey, maybe it's changed a little bit since COVID, with unemployment so high and the stakes being different. And I'd like to start with you, Phil.
Sure. So I think one of the key things that I would say, and it just happened to me today. So I'm interviewing for my own team, and I had an interview today with someone who didn't turn on their video camera. Referred to what a convenient thing it was that he lived in San Jose, where obviously our headquarters is. But really being aware of your audience, number one, and then also being aware of what businesses are considering in the COVID world. For instance, you're looking around the panel, we're all working from home. And so all companies are going back into an office in a very different staggered format. And so just being aware that, of what's going on in COVID and how that might be impacting employers, I think is one way to stand out. And feel free to ask questions about that as well. Ask questions about, how is it with everybody working from home? How is it? When are you guys thinking about going back into the office? I mean, I think standing out is really one of the easiest ways is to do your homework and know your audience and show up really prepared. Having somebody show up for an interview with me at Zoom Video Communications on a Zoom link that I sent to them and not have their video on is just not necessarily being prepared for that interview.
Okay, Amit, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would. Phil, I love what you said about, understanding your audience. I think I would take it, I don't want to say one step further. I would just add to it and saying that remember that even though we're talking over video, people are still human, right? And do whatever you can in order to engage someone's humanity in a human way, right? Whether that's, maybe explaining that, okay, you have kids running around in the background. That's totally fine. If it's, I didn't get to tell you something, earlier in the conversation, let me send you a quick note. Because again, we're humans engaging with each other. We're not computers engaging with each other. So don't forget people's humanity. One other thing I would love to add is that this is a time that is unfortunate for a lot of people. And I'm sure the rest of my panel feel lucky that we're in a position where we have jobs and we can give jobs to others. However, I do have to say that a lot of people are worried that, okay, on my resume, it's going to show that I lost my job, or on my resume, it's going to show that I don't have a job now. The thing is, everyone knows it's COVID time. Everyone knows that this is the time when the world kind of went kablooey, right? And so don't spend time worrying that, okay, like what's this going to do to my career? What's this going to look like on a resume? Because we all understand. In fact, I would say take the opportunity to try something new, to segue into a place where you want to learn even more about something, because this is your opportunity to do it without seemingly having, how should I say, a little hiccup in your career.
Thanks, Amit. I just along those lines, something that came up in the earlier session was, and you both touched on it, was, your people too, as engaged and motivated as the candidates are, you guys are equally engaged and motivated to hire the right person. I think there's a perception that, Amit and Sam are just sitting there, oh, there's another one, okay, who is this? And it's not like that at all. In fact, you guys are really busy. So what I heard you say was, hey, we want to engage with you. So the easier you make it for us to engage with you, the better, whether it's being authentic, whether it's being well prepared. But, you know, and so I guess the point I'm making is I've learned too, you guys are busy. And so I try really hard to make sure to bear that in mind. So it's not I, me, and my haste and my eagerness to capture your affect or your attention. I think I sometimes forget to just be present and be aware. And so that's good feedback. David or Sam, did you want to add anything to the candidate, you know, hygiene 101 concept?
I will. I read this book once called Guerrilla Marketing. And so as I think about guerrilla marketing for the individual who's looking, one of the ways, as the other panelists have said, know your audience. Find out what your audience has been doing for COVID-19, so that when you do your guerrilla marketing, let's say you say, well, you know, during the time of COVID-19, this is what I did. I planted a garden. I volunteered to check on my neighbors. You know, videotape it, tweety. I'm sorry, I'm old school. I might mix that up, but tweet. LinkedIn, but do something about yourself so that when you do talk about COVID-19, you all come together, you know, you both have that human side, and make sure it's not all about you, but you find out about what the company did. So again, when you're thinking of ways to do your guerrilla marketing, you kind of align with what they're doing. That's the only thing I want to add.
Thanks, Sam. David, do you want to dip in your oar?
Well, yeah, just to build on that, I mean, I agree 100%. I think it's really important right now. Every company is wrestling with the current situation and then what happens next, right? And some have been quite declarative, and like Facebook and come out and said, all of our employees can work anywhere for the rest of the time. Others are being a bit more cautious around how things are going to play out in the mid to long term. But I think it's important for all of you when you're looking at employers to do that research and go, well, how is this company navigating the current situation, and does that work for me and what I have to offer? And I mean, I think I saw someone in the chat make a comment that she'd worked from home for 15 years. So clearly you're in a position right now where there are tens of thousands of employees of companies that have never worked from home and are struggling with it, or have never kind of worked as part of a remote team or led or managed a remote team. And so you have to play to your strengths, right? And if you have had that experience in previous jobs, then yeah, I mean, you know, you're in a great situation where you can leverage that experience and capitalize on it.
Thanks, David. It's all good points. One of the things that came up in this morning's session that I thought, and I know it's a little controversial, so I'm going to just fall on the grenade now, is, listen, according to research, on average, if a company gets about 250 responses to each open rec, and downstream we can talk about how much time they spend looking at each response. But what's interesting about it is you guys are getting overwhelmed. I think some people stay at home and they, whatever you want to call it, spray and pray, but they just shotgun their resume or their profile indiscriminately to positions. And it's hard for you guys because two things. One is it clogs up the system. So, and then two, it kind of lets you know, hey, the person wasn't that intentional or thorough when they submitted their interest or expressed their interest. So I often tell people, hey, you know what I would do? The best job to apply is for the one that doesn't exist because there's no competition. If I want to work for Phil, I'll just look Phil up on LinkedIn and do my homework and reach out to Phil, independent of the applicant tracking system or the algorithm, and kind of bypass the system. And it sparked kind of an interesting conversation. So I'd love to hear, because some of the panelists were like, well, that's not cool, you know, but other ones were, well, you know, if you want to stand out, that's a good way. So who wants to fall on that sword, Phil?
Amit go first on that one.
Okay, go. Amit can take everything.
No, yeah, I have several opinions on this.
I have several opinions on this. Now, you know, when you're talking about like there being so much inbound and so many resumes to go through, when we think about the different sources of talent, I mean, and it's not limited to this, but generally we have inbound applications, we have the people that the recruiting teams go out and find, we have, you know, university programs, we have internal candidates, we have contractor conversions, we have agency candidates, we have all these candidates that we're trying to look at, right? But we also have percentages of success, right? When it comes to
the percentage of hires that come from every source. At Couchbase, and it could be similar to other companies as well, about 15% of our hires come from inbound applications. 30 come from candidates that my team has gone to find. 30 to 35% actually come from referrals, and the rest come from everything else. Now, what that means is that if we have hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of candidates coming in that only account for 15% of the time, then we are spending 15% of our time going through the most of the candidates, right? And so what does that mean? We are trying to find ways to not necessarily filter people out, but we're trying to say, okay, well, we know we're looking for these 6 qualifications. Fantastic, great. All right, does this resume have it? No. All right, next. Does this resume have it? No. We literally have 20 to 30 seconds to look at each resume. However, in order to stand out, I mean, I have a really simple strategy, and it's kind of a combination of what you said, Andrew, in that find someone at the company who is doing the job that you want to do, or in the group that you want to do it. Send a LinkedIn message to them and say, hey, I'm interested in this role. You know, either A, I would like to have an informational conversation with you, or B, I'm interested in this role. Would you mind referring me? Because let me tell you, like someone at a company does not need to know like a candidate in order to refer them, but they get the bonus if that person is successful, right? Let me also say that because 30 to 35% of the candidates that we hire do come from referrals, and there are far fewer referrals than there are inbound applications, when we look at those resumes, we are finding ways for that person to work, right? We're finding opportunities for that person to actually come in the door. We're not trying to filter people out. We're trying to filter people in. It's interesting that there are differing strategies based on how someone enters our process. However, it's just math at the end of the day. So yeah, my hint would be finding the person who does the job that you want, who is in the team that you want to be in. Reach out to them and see how you can get referred. Quick hint.
Good. That's good. Phil, David, you want to pile on, or do you have an opinion on that?
Well, yeah, I'd sort of add in by saying, I mean, I think Amit's correct. I mean, the challenge with inbound applications is just the volume issue. And so anything else you can do I think you can't rely on that. You have to be creative, and you have to be persistent, and you have to explore as many different avenues to sort of engage and connect with the right person as possible. So to Amit's point, recruiters are working with hiring managers and business leaders all the time. If the hiring manager comes to them going, oh, I got this email, it looks interesting, can you take a look at it? They have to look at it, as opposed to your resume being one of 200 sitting in the database that, you know, the recruiter is really busy and hasn't really had the chance to kind of scrutinize carefully. I think, and sometimes, you know, and this pleases me as a sort of old school recruiter, but sometimes the old school stuff works really well. I mean, I can give you a great example. You know, our CEO sent around an email a couple weekends ago based on a sort of personal note that he'd received from a sales candidate who just basically was a really well-written note, well composed, and just said, look, I did have conversations with your team. I think the job was in Portland, and we hardly ever hire in Portland, so it didn't play out because of a headcount issue. But this guy followed up and referenced that and said he'd really enjoyed the experience of talking to us. And our CEO forwarded it to all the sort of sales VPs down the West Coast and to me and to my team, and just said, look, just so you guys know, I rarely get such well-written notes. And that says something to me about the fact that this person is probably a pretty good seller. So let's at least go talk to him and explore every avenue to try and see if we can find him an opportunity. So sometimes those old school, you know, techniques really do work.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything you want to add, Phil?
I like that a lot, David. Yeah, I think, again, with the topic being how do you stand out, I think one of the critical ways to stand out is just to be able to know, I mean, all of us on the inside are trying to hit a bullseye. Mm-hmm. And that bullseye is defined by the business value that this position brings to the company. And the closer that you can get to that bullseye in your communications with any of my employees, any of my recruiters, any of my executives, the better chance you have. So the further out from that bullseye you are, and you're taking a flyer, you may or you may not get a look, even if you go directly at an employee. So I think as you're evaluating your chances, you know, stand up and walk to the other side of the table and say, if I was a hiring manager and I had to achieve these objectives in my business, and I was under a tremendous amount of pressure quarterly to deliver whatever X is, how can I help that person Or would I look across the table at myself and say, that's the person to help me achieve those objectives? And the more that you can empathize and use that empathy with the hiring manager on the other side, the better you're going to position yourself. To David's point, you write a really well-crafted complimentary note to an executive at a company, it's going to get noticed and it's going to get passed around. And it is empathetic and it is well written and it is well thought out. And the more that if you put the effort into it, that's what shows. And I think that's what David's executive recognizes. This person put a lot of thought into this, wrote a well-crafted, articulate note. And so we need to get those eyes on that individual. And that's how you stand out.
Wow.
I also want to add something really quickly. I'm a huge fan of all of these points. I also want to add that, say, you weren't able to get the role that you were looking for at a particular company, but then you write that note, right? And you continue to engage, et cetera. We have applicant tracking systems for a reason. It's so we can actively source from them, right? We can actively source for candidates that have previously exhibited their own interests. That doesn't mean that in 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, that we won't reach back out to you and say, hey, you know what? I don't know if you're still interested in Couchbase or Box, et cetera, but we have this role that we think would be perfect for you. We'd love to fast track you, primarily because of the interaction that you had with them before. We track all of that, and it can really do wonders.
That's a really good point, Amit. And I just want to back up and say, because what's really powerful, you guys, our esteemed panel, is to give the people listening insight into how it is for you. You feel you're spot on. I get so caught up and I want to impress you on this job and me and I don't think, well, what's Phil, how is this, how can I make what I'm saying and doing easier and more logical for Phil? And it sounds like, in listening to all of you, the answer is you got to do, if you're smart, you'll do them in parallel. You'll do the right thing by submitting an interest through the applicant tracking system or responding to a job rec that you see online. But in parallel, you can follow that up and do it with intention. And it's not, I love instant gratification, but it takes so long. In a job search, I think you have to play the long game, what you said, Amit, and just keep continuing to express interest and stand out and be persistent. But I want to go back to something earlier. One of the things that happens to me, and I wonder if it happens to you guys, is people will come to me and say, hey, Andrew, can you talk to my kid or my friend because you know all these TA people? And so I'll talk to the person, and the first thing I'll say is, so what do you want to do? And I'm never not amazed when the person says, well, gosh, I love people and I love money. And I did a internship, and it's like, well, hold on a second. Like, if I asked you, if you wanted to go on vacation, you'd say, the Bahamas, right? You wouldn't say, well, I want to. So part of your job is, and part of it's the candidate's job as well, is to be very intentional and clear on what their objective is. And it's okay to shoot high and miss, and it's okay to shoot low and hit, but you have to shoot. So what feedback do you have for the people listening about what can they do to make it easier for you to engage with them, with the caveat that, networking's good, making sure you know someone on LinkedIn, finding a mentor. I love that. Who's doing something that you want to do, and just follow that person and shadow them. But what guidance do you have for that line of reasoning I just expressed? Sam, you want to, because I think you probably have a good perspective on that.
Well, I'm going to plug Woody here, Women International and Technology International. I think that you said, like, what guidance? Me as a professional, I've always joined organizations. I remember even when I was in college, I joined Management Information Systems, which I had no idea what it was. That was just my major. But when I went to these meetings, not only because they had good food, cheese and crackers, I would meet people who worked at the companies that I wanted to pursue. So the same thing with Witty. Witty has a network of 130,000 members across the United Nations. And so with that many members, if I'm going to target somebody or target an organization, I would try to use an organization to help me get to those people. Because the one thing we will have in common, oh, you remember Witty. And sometimes that works. Or you remember a PMI, Project Management Institute. So that would be my advice, is find the organizations that your likely target could be at and work it from internally.
Okay. Amit, Phil, David, you want to say anything along those lines?
Sure. You know what, I would actually take it back a step and try to understand the why behind, uh, you know, getting a connection at a particular place or trying to do a very specific thing. Because one thing that I've learned in my career, and this might not be like head of talent advice, this is more just Amit being Amit advice, in that I think I figured out what I love to do because I kept following journeys that were authentic to what I wanted to learn more about, right? Like I wanted to learn more about like when I was in the performing arts, right? I wanted to become a better dancer. I wanted to do this, and I was able to segue that into a role in New York. And then I wanted to learn more about the law, and so I went to law school and I was an attorney for several years. And then I realized, like when I was doing mergers and acquisitions work, that I really love this idea of kind of resetting people within organizations so they could add more value. And then I ended up being a coach for a while. And then I ended up learning more about these people and these individual journeys. And now I'm in this head of talent role, which is the culmination of everything that I've wanted to do. And the thing is with this is that I would not have said, like when I graduated college, you know what, I think I want to be in talent acquisition. I think that's the case. I think that's what I want to do. I wouldn't have said, oh, I want to go into executive coaching. Oh, I wanted to be a lawyer. I don't know if I would have said any of those things, but because I think I gave myself the opportunity to shift, right? When I felt like I was, okay, I'm kind of done with this experience. I want to sort of move forward in another area. I ended up being uniquely qualified for something that turned into my dream job. And I think that's the big advice that I want to give to everyone, no matter how junior or how senior you are. As long as you keep moving forward in learning what you want to learn more about and continuing with that and then shifting when you feel like shifting, et cetera, at the end of a certain amount of time, you become uniquely qualified for your dream job. So yeah.
That's great, Amit. I love it. That's kind of a little of Earl Nightingale. Success is the progressive realization of a worthwhile ideal, but you kept showing up, and it's hard. I want to again take another step back. It's hard when you show up and nothing happens, and you keep showing up and nothing happens. And the takeaway for me is, listen, you show up and nothing may happen, but if you don't show up, I promise you nothing will happen.
Yeah.
So the trick is to show up when you don't get the results that you wanted. And I loved how you articulated that. I wanted to say something else. There's always, some conversation and guidance around, hey, should my LinkedIn profile do this or should my resume do that? Can we have kind of an overarching conversation about resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn profiles, do's, don'ts, hygiene, etiquette? I think just as a place to begin, I think less is more, which is a challenge for me, as most of you know. My kids, I always say this, my kids say, Dad, you can stop saying long story short. Okay, let's just start there. So anyways, that's hard for me. And so if I'm getting 250 resumes and I'm spending 7 seconds looking at them, I guess I have to get in and get out. So what is your feedback and guidance around not just networking, but how I position myself in the resumes and the cover letters and the correspondence on social media, kind of all of it. David?
Yeah, sure, I can take that one. I think the first thing I would say that given how the industry has changed, it's probably, I don't necessarily care where I get the information from, whether it's a resume or a LinkedIn profile. I just want the information that I need to kind of make the determination as to whether I feel like the candidate's a good fit for what we're trying to find. I think you also probably have to consider the fact that given that you're now sending all of this stuff, electronically, and it's landing in databases and applicant tracking systems, it's not, I think, yes, worry about the presentation and the font and how it looks, but given that sometimes these things get mashed up in translation, again, I think it's primarily important to focus on the content. This is honestly just a personal opinion, but I've never been a huge fan of especially very long cover letters. I don't want to sort of talk out of both sides of my mouth, because I did say earlier that sometimes a well-written and well-crafted email can be extremely powerful, but whenever my heart sinks every time I see a cover letter that is basically a sort of long summary of the person's resume, that's a huge turnoff for me. I think, so whether I'm being sent a resume or just accessing the person's profile on my phone, on LinkedIn, on the LinkedIn app, again, as long as it gives me enough information, I think the less is more comment is a good yardstick. But then I think you also have to recognize that recruiters are always looking to kind of sift through the noise, and they will have sort of keywords or technology acronyms or company names that they're trying to kind of filter through everything to find. So don't sell yourself short in trying to sort of squeeze everything onto one page. If you do really need to articulate the buzzwords, and sadly, I think recruiters do kind of, like bees around a honeypot, do get drawn in by those kinds of acronyms. So, you have to play that game.
Interesting. Phil, I'd love to hear your 2 cents, only because Lord only knows how many inbound, there's a question in the chat I saw. Is it, most companies are both hunters and gatherers. In other words, Starbucks needs, well, maybe not so much now, that's a bad example. Walmart needs people, right? Clerks, and they're going to post. But if I need a Ruby on Rails programmer that speaks French and Vietnamese, I'm probably going to have to source that person. So, but Phil, what guidance do you have for someone, because you're probably getting deluged with applications and resumes and cover letters? And how do you, I mean, I'm sure the applicant tracking system and the AI and the machine learning do some of it, but how do you manage that? And what can you say to the group to kind of encourage them, and at the same time not be, unrealistic? Sure.
Yeah. So I think that, again, it kind of comes down again to me to the bullseye. So we get a lot, we've gotten a lot of inbound, and I think it's a quality thing. So as Amit says, we go through the inbound applications first because it's a ready source of talent. And if there's high quality applying to our jobs, we really won't default to go out to external search, go out to agencies, et cetera. If that quality is low, we go through a sourcing routine, but we're always looking at inbound and looking for that high quality. I would say, as far as it pertains to your LinkedIn profile or your resume, we think most recent. So we have a recency bias. So in other words, if you're applying for a project manager in the HRIS department and you have been a project manager in the HRIS department in the last couple of years, you're going to get that box ticked. If you were a project manager in an HRIS department 10 years ago, it doesn't matter. Right. And I hate to say that, but it is a recency thing. It is how close are you to that bullseye? And again, I'll keep coming back to that. The other thing that I would advise everybody to do is we can spot quality easily because we know what we're looking for. We've sat with the hiring manager. We've mind melded with that individual. We know what she's looking for. So when we're going and we're looking, we are trying our best to match. I call it original intelligence instead of artificial intelligence, because we get smarter the more we do this. But quantify your results. Mm-hmm. That's the big thing. We love, LinkedIn profiles or resumes that can speak to the outcomes. So many people talk about what they did, but not what it resulted in. And the more you can add results to your profile, to your resume, you're going to get a lot more nods and a little bit more lingering time, to David's point, as we're skimming through resumes. When we see those results, increased revenue by this, reduced cost by this. So again, to Sam's point, Sam's a business owner, been a business owner her whole career. As a business owner, she wants to know her bottom line. How are you going to affect her bottom line? So think about how you've affected the bottom line of your previous employers and make sure you articulate that, because that will stand out.
God, what a great answer. Thanks, Phil. I would just like to come back to something one of you said, and I know it all runs together at some level, but it's interesting. There's a lot of like, hey, how much information should I include on my resume, profile, emails, cover letter? I mean, and how relevant? What if I've been off the job market for 2 years? Or what if, I don't have any experience? I've heard it said that, I can teach you how to type or answer the phone, but I can't teach you how to care. So to your point, what are some of the core competencies or qualities that you look for above and beyond let's just assume that you fit the general criteria of it. What are some of the kind of the extra stuff, the sizzle, if you will, that you guys look for in candidates or in as you're screening candidates? Amit?
Gosh, several things. And I think I want to go back to something I said originally. I am a sucker for authenticity and I'm a sucker for humanity. If no matter when during the interview process we're engaging, you are kind, you're generous, you have a generous spirit, you understand the perspective of others, and you want others to understand your perspective, like that's genuine. That's goodness. And that's something that will also allow hiring managers and interviewers to say, you know what, they don't necessarily have the exact experience I'm looking for, but I feel like I want to work with them. Let's see what else they can do. Let's see what else they can do. I also think that, I mean, we're talking about like cover letters and resumes. You know what, I'm kind of melding these two questions. When it comes to a cover letter, I've never really felt the need to like read it that much. I mean, there's just so much we have to do, right? However, I do appreciate when there's a lens added, that a lens that needs to be applied when looking through a resume. And sometimes a short summary, a statement at the very top, talking about like your current situation, what you're hoping to do, and like, I'm not necessarily like why your most recent experience plays into, and Phil, going right into what you were saying, like plays into the strategic priorities of the business that you were a part of / the business that you want to be a part of. Like just 2 sentences at the very top can do everything that you want a cover letter to do, and it can help us see you in the way that you want to be seen.
Good answer. Sam, you want to add anything, or David?
Real quickly, Andrew, I wanted to add, when it comes to LinkedIn, I like to see the volunteer work.
Oh.
Because I'm one of those parents who made my son do volunteer work, and I have to say made or bribed. Because even when I was younger, I did volunteer work, and then as an adult, I just naturally transitioned to doing volunteer work. And I also like to see letters of recommendation. And sometimes I know, even with myself, you know, you might be afraid or to ask the last person you work with to give you a letter of recommendation. Be working that before you leave the company. When you walk in the door, you're like, okay, well, you know, I know I'm going to leave, especially if you're a contractor, or eventually you might leave to go to another position. But be like, who are my allies? And who will I get to write me a letter of recommendation so that as I do transcend, I will have somebody to back me up.
Good feedback. I think a couple of the key takeaways I heard was have a direction. I loved what you said, Phil. Well, I think you've all said it, is how specifically are you going to help Zoom, or how are you going to help elevate this company's game? And not being, I think one of the biggest challenges I encounter, and I'd love to hear what you guys think, is we're not taught, Amit, you said this, we're not taught how to advocate for ourselves, right? So we're not taught, hey, I'm really, and so if we're not comfortable, you know, advocating for ourselves or lobbying for ourselves, and we're maybe sensitive because we've not, you know, built a piano before, but we love music and we can play the piano, I think there's a perception that we kind of give off this energy that, oh gosh, so learning how to advocate. And I loved what you said. In fact, let's talk about that. Let's dive a little deeper, because there was some controversy on the earlier panel about, because I happen to agree with you, Sam. I think it's super important. If I'm looking at your profile and I see that you love fostering puppies, well, you know, guess what? I have a baby chocolate lab or whatever. So really kind of catering or positioning my interests and passions around yours, or at the very least acknowledging yours and doing, and I think the line Tom Bruchot said it was, there's a fine line between talking and stalking. But what are your thoughts around that? Is there, because I agree with you, Sam. I think anything I can say and do to elevate my impression, your impression of me, or my connection to you, particularly if it's authentic. But even if it's not, I think all roads lead to Rome. So could you guys react to that?
I can, I mean, actually, as I was thinking about, as you were talking, Andrew, I mean, most of the conversation has been focused on just getting the foot in the door and using your resume or some form of engagement to sort of get the company interested. But I think we also need to talk about, you know, if you have the opportunity to interview, how you show up, right? And how you present yourself, and the full 360-degree human, as Sam said. Like, what are the other things that you offer that are going to help you stand out and differentiate yourself from other candidates, and really signal that you could be a great culture add to this organization. And I think actually, I mean, I'm sure everyone else on the panel feels the same way. Right now, for our recruiters, we have to think really carefully about how we showcase what we have to offer in a purely virtual environment, right? And I can certainly speak for my company. Box certainly felt very confident that when we could showcase our environment and our culture and the people who work at Box, then we would do really well, because we feel very proud of our culture, and that's almost been taken away from us. So I think for you guys is, you obviously want to not just get a job, you want to find somewhere where you feel at home and where you feel like you can do great work and have a great career. And so that is harder for you now, because you don't get to kind of, look around the lobby and see how the other employees are interacting as you're walking from the lobby to the place where you're having your interview. So you have to be really, I guess, alert and cognizant of the cues and the company gives you to sort of signal whether, A, they're handling this kind of remote work situation well, and B, do they have the kind of culture where, whether it's in the office or virtual, they're going to, it's an environment where you're going to enjoy working with people, and you're going to hopefully want to stick around for a long time to come.
And David, that's a great point. I purposely do. I think there's a lot of, and I shouldn't make that assumption, but I do tend to focus more on getting the interview, and you're right. So let's talk about that in greater detail. What are some of the best practices, post-COVID, let's say, that you look for, positively and negative, with respect to showing up, with, the caveat that doing your homework, right? Looking professional, turning your video camera on. I think that's so important. I'm never not amazed when people don't do that. And it's not a judgment or put down. It's just, I'd love to see you. I was on a call yesterday where the guy was, piloting something for me, and he had a great picture of him, I don't know what he was, water skiing or flying on a plane, doing something amazing, but I couldn't see his face. I couldn't, I just wanted to connect with him. So it's harder enough with video. So anyways, backing up, let's talk about best practices for interviewing post-COVID, with hopefully a slant towards well past the blocking and the tackling, but any kind of, not hacks, but anything really that comes to mind that you look for, again, positively or negatively. And I think we'll start with Amit.
About a million things, I'm sure. But one thing for sure is curiosity. Whenever someone is curious about the business, they're curious about someone's particular role, their interviewer's particular role, curious about what the next steps are in the business, curious about how they did in the conversation, it makes it feel so much more like they're invested, right? And I love seeing when someone is invested before they even have to be. So that is just huge. I'm not saying that, okay, hey, let me just make up some questions that I can ask. Actually, be curious about something, and don't feel the need that, okay, tell me about your company culture. I mean, that's a fine question, but if you ask that to absolutely everybody, I mean, we're all going to share information. I mean, feel free to be like what didn't work for you this past year? What's the biggest challenge that you're facing right now, that the interviewer is facing, right? Because chances are there's someone who's going to be deeply involved in the work that you would end up doing. So that, I think, is one pearl of wisdom. But there are about a million things that I'm happy to share.
Well, that's a good one. And you were the what's your why guy too, and I think that's important. I'd love to hear from David, Phil, Sam on that. Do's, don'ts. What have you got? Sam, you want to say something?
I would add that as you're asking questions about the future, I would also ask about the last person who was in the role, what happened to them, if they're still on the team. Did they go to another team? And I'd also ask about the team itself. How big is the team? What does a day in the life look like? Mm-hmm. If you want to be adventurous and say, if I were to be selected, because I used to like to always end. If I were selected, what would a day in a life be like? And I'm always available, if you'd like to bring me back for, another interview.
And Phil, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm gonna totally dogpile on what on the curiosity thing that Amit said, because so all we do, and you guys know this because everybody here has worked for years, or maybe even a year, but we all solve problems. That's what we do. We get paid to solve problems. Some of them are big problems. Some of them are small problems. Some of them are daily problems. Some of them are year-long problems, but that's what we get paid to do. And having that curiosity, that fundamental, it's an attribute. You can't teach curiosity. If you can demonstrate that curiosity, the way it gets translated by the person who's interviewing you is, this person's going to dig. This person's going to uncover. This person is going to help me solve problems. And I think it's a great question. And again, Amit said this, is that what is your biggest challenge? What, in the last year, or as you look forward for the next 6 months, what's the most important thing that you have to solve? And then being able to listen and actually listen to that and translate it into either work you've done previously or how you might help approach solving that in the role that you're interviewing for. I mean, again, when you get into an interview and it's a tit for tat, it's a really bad interview, in my opinion. An interview needs to be a conversation. And if you get into conversation because you're a naturally curious person and you're asking questions and there's a flow, that automatically elevates your status in that interviewer's mind, because they're looking at you as, I'm going to need to work with this person day in, day out. So yes, it's about solving problems, but I want to know that I can relate to you and that we can relate to each other. And you're asking me thoughtful questions and you're giving me thoughtful responses. And we're having this dialogue instead of, I think someone else mentioned it, just a canned question of, tell me about your culture, or, and again, there aren't really bad questions, but a dialogue goes a long way. So get into dialogue with your interviewer. Don't let it just be a back and forth kind of checking boxes on a piece of paper thing.
Phil, I have to add on to that because I couldn't agree more. Also, one thing that I think people in talent understand is that one-on-one interviews have historically been sometimes the worst way to actually gauge talent in a person, right? So there's the absolute worst way, unless you have someone who is like the ultimate expert in something and also the ultimate expert in engaging with someone else. Like, you're not going to have the ideal interview. And so as much as we want to check boxes and as much as we want to say, all right, this person is, I would give them a strong hire in this particular competency and a hire in this particular competency and a no hire in this competency. As bad as this might be, it can also be a good thing, in that interviewers want to feel good at the end of a conversation. Not like, oh, this candidate made me feel special. Not like that. But they want to feel like that was time well spent, and engaging in problem solving, engaging in talking about challenges. That is time well spent. So just something to think about when you have the opportunity to engage with folks.
God, that probably little nugget, and it didn't come up in this morning's panel, is gold. Curiosity, because you're right. All of you are right, Phil. If I'm curious, then I'm engaged. I care. And I'm asking questions. And so it lets you know I'm thinking downstream. I think what happens to a lot of us is, I'm so intent upon impressing you and telling you how smart I am and how capable I am. And then maybe I even go too far and turn myself inside out. I loved your comment, Amit, about, what's your why? Like, if I'm not, listen, I'm either the right person for the job or I'm not. I'm either a fit or I'm not. And sometimes no, like it or not, it's happened to all of us, sometimes no is God's ultimate protection. So the challenge is, how do I show up for you to elevate my chances? I love that word, David, signal to you that I'm the right person. And we all know hiring, that's why you guys have to be so thorough and discerning when you're hiring, because a good hire is one thing. A bad hire is far more, effective. I mean, not doing a bad hire is better than hiring a good hire, quite honestly, because it takes a long time to unwind. And by say bad hire, I just mean not a fit for whatever reason. So that's a great, and I think also there's like, who do you want me to be? I had a friend that used to say, he said his mom was so bossy and controlling. His thing was stop, drop, and roll. Who do you want me to be? I'll be that person. You want me to be? Okay, great. And it's like, that's great, but you're not doing stand-up comedy. you're selling software or whatever, right? So that's a great point to figure out what you want to do. And I've often heard the 4 pillars are you good at it? Do you enjoy it? Can you get paid? And by the way, if you're good at it and you enjoy it, it's just a matter of time until you get paid. That's the way I look at it. All right, so let's talk about that, that kind of stepchild of, okay, I'm not particularly proud of my resume or my work history because it's got some blemishes or some gaps. Can't really hide it. So what I always tell people, and that is, well, just what you said, Sam, I loved it. Like, what are you doing? If you're not actively, working on your career search, then there's tons of things you can do to elevate your game. You can get certifications, you can go to events, you can read a book, there's a ton of stuff you can do on self-improvement to help you help yourself to get into a situation. So would love to hear comments or feedback from the panel on productive things that you guys look for that you would encourage people to do in parallel with their career search to keep their blade sharp. Sam, how about you lead it off?
All right, Andrew. I was responding there to text. Okay. Can you repeat the question? Because I was responding to something.
Okay, I'll let you listen to someone else's answer
Okay.
while I do it. Amit, so tell me, what do you recommend people do in their spare time to stay sharp?
Yeah, well, there's a million things that are out there right now, right? I memean, including free tools on Khan Academy and Udemy. I mean, I feel like online learning is hitting its stride right now. So there are also always a ton of opportunities there. I also think, and this is kind of going back to something that Sam said when you're talking about volunteerism, staying sharp is also engaging in ways that are fundamentally important to you. And so I think that could also be a fantastic thing, diving into something else that you care about that might not be, I don't want to say that might not be career focused, but it's very like you focused. I think that's important. And this is sort of the opportunity to do it during this time.
David, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great answer, Amit, and I would be the same. I mean, I think everyone's different. Everyone wants to kind of approach ongoing kind of learning and development in different ways, and some people love studying and taking courses and signing up for things online. Other people don't, but I think the important thing is you think about, again, to your point, Andrew, like what's the direction you're going in? What are you trying to achieve? But also taking a step back and thinking about what you've done. Maybe your resume does have a couple of speed bumps on it, but what else are you bringing to the table that could be valuable to an organization? And just thinking about my own experience, I definitely felt when I first had the opportunity to move here that I was going to look to try and leverage the international experience I'd gained, because I knew coming into Silicon Valley, a lot of people who were phenomenal in other ways hadn't had that kind of exposure and experience of spending time in an environment like Hong Kong or Singapore. And so that was something I was looking to kind of leverage for myself. And I think everyone, whether it's a hobby, whether it's a life experience, I think it's really important, especially if you're anxious about your resume for whatever reason, that you really think laterally like that and try and figure out what you do bring to the table.
I want to add something really, I feel like I can't shut up, I apologize. There's something that you can really do for yourself that'll help every job conversation you have in the future. And this is different than an elevator pitch, but sometimes you want to be just finding the string that connects every experience in your life, right? And you want to be able to do that in a way that's engaging, that is true to who you are, but also like kind of take people on that journey of your own, right? I oftentimes, whenever I'm in panels or having conversations with potential candidates, sometimes I get hey, here's my resume. What do you think I would be good at? It's like, no, I want to hear from you what you'd be good at. I want to hear from you, like the value that you're going to bring. And so sometimes really taking some time and maybe creating that narrative, right? Building it out, actually writing it out such that when the opportunity arises, you are ready, you are engaged, and you are engaging. I remember when I was able to do that for myself, and this is after what someone calls a successful career, but I still wasn't happy at all. It wasn't until I was able to create that narrative that no one doubted me, right? And no one should be doubting you either.
And
Phil,
Amit, yeah, let me,
please.
Andrew, real quickly, just let me dogpile on this because this is really, I think this is really important. If you think that there's anybody on this panel or attending this that doesn't have a hiccup in their background or something in their history, you can't have, I saw a chat, I have 25 years of experience. Should I put it all on there? You don't have to put 25 years on there, but put on there what is important to you and what crafted and molded you to who you are. I quit my job and started an organic lawn care company at one point in my career. I moved to a 70-acre farm and raised alpacas while I worked for Oracle. And in my last job before Zoom, when I was interviewing for that job, I had a CRO who met with me 3 times because he couldn't wrap his mind around who was I that I would go start an organic lawn care company and go raise alpacas. And I had that narrative. To Amit's perspective, I had that narrative. I wasn't ashamed of it. I was actually able to translate what that means about me and why you should hire that. Because it means that I'm curious. It means that I have values and I live those values. It means all of the things that you want in an employee and a valued member of your team. And you just have to help people see that sometimes if you have these situations. And this one might be one for some of you. COVID may have you out of a job and you may go do something today that is completely off track from your career. And you may come back into an interview and you may have somebody say, why did you go start an ashram, in 2020? And as long as you've got that narrative and you stand there proud and tall and translate it to your values and the things that mean something to you, if they don't see that, you don't want that job.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, what's a great, I'm laughing because my son's building a boma out here in the backyard. No, he's not. That's a great answer. No, but it is, it speaks to, just what someone in the earlier panel threw out, Udemy and, Coursera. There's just so much stuff that you can learn and do that will, fuel or make more valuable the stuff that you've already done. It's a great commentary on the importance of, do you have 25 years of experience or 1 year, 25 times? Like just the key takeaways. That's very powerful. And I think we mean well, but I want to convey so much information and we kind of get stuck. I get stuck in the weeds and just saying, hey, I did this, I did that. Sam, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to add that going back to the volunteer work, I once volunteered for an online project with the United Nations to create something. I had no idea what I was doing. But once I volunteered that time for, I think it was about 80 or 90 days, I was able to secure a contract with another huge utility company because I had that experience. So I would suggest volunteer if you can't find a gig right away.
Okay, that's good feedback. Okay, you guys, we're almost out of time. So what I'd like to do to put a bow on this is 2 things. One is I'd love for all of you to just take a minute and well, first let me thank all of you for your time and energy. I know an hour with you guys is not insignificant. So on behalf of Woody and everybody that's listening, thank you, all of you, because I know what it's a huge investment of time and you have to give it away if you want to keep it, and that, Phil, I think you kind of touched on, or maybe it was Amit, all of you. If you help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want. And you kind of said that, Sam. But I'd love it if you could just say, hey, how can we get in touch with you? And then if you could only say one thing to one person or to everybody and say, this is the one thing you should bear in mind. If they just one takeaway from this panel or this call, if I could impart one piece of guidance, wisdom, feedback, it's going to be X. And I realize I'm in the order that you go. So I'm going to start with Amit.
Sure. So first of all, anyone can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to lend any advice or take any advice, really, for my own self. When it comes to what I would share, I would go back to this entire idea of keep learning what you're passionate about learning, what you want to learn more about, even if it's a little thing, even if it's a big thing, because again, at the end of a certain number of years, you'll become uniquely qualified for something that turns into your dream job. And it's not important to worry about what that job is right now. So take the opportunities when they come.
Okay, thanks, Amit. Sam?
I'm on LinkedIn, samscully.com as well. But I would say do a PowerPoint of yourself, do an overview. And when you go into the interview, show them a quick overview of your life and your professionalism.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. David?
I think, well, I mean, probably I would say be open-minded. Sometimes life throws you curveballs, and I think it's important to not get too stuck on one direction. I think often the best opportunities come when you have the chance to, well, either when circumstances take over your well-founded plans, or where you just have that chance to take a step back and think about, well, there are different ways for me to climb this mountain. You know, I mean, I definitely feel like a bit of a one-trick pony compared to Amit and Phil with their alpaca and dance adventures.
Oh, David.
But again, my journey was different. My journey was geographical. I went around the world, right, rather than sort of staying in London. So I think, and I know that the lady who runs learning and development at Box is always trying to encourage employees to think, she calls it the jungle gym mentality. So, rather than just going straight up, everyone wants to go straight up these days and get promoted every 6 months. But I mean, to build a career, you often have to climb sideways in order to continue the journey upwards. So think creatively and laterally rather than just northwards.
Great feedback. How do we get in touch with you, David?
Oh yeah, I threw my LinkedIn profile link in the chat. But yeah, I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn, I think.
All right, Phil, why don't you wrap it up for us?
You bet. We are, my piece of advice to everybody on the call is to just stay positive, right? You're going to get no's. You're going to get, just by the nature of the beast, you may get ghosted by a company here and there. It's not intentional. It has nothing to do with who you are as a person. I've personally lived through the .com crash, September 11th, 2008, and now COVID. And I can tell you it will go away. This will come back. The job market will be robust. What you do between now and the time that you get hired into your next job just adds to the fabric of who you are. And do not be ashamed of who you are, but bring all of you to every interview that you approach, and you will find the next role or the dream role that's out there for you. But stay positive.
And how do we find you, Phil?
I'm on LinkedIn. I put mine in the chat as well. We're TA guys. We're really easy to find.
Right.
We're not in the shadows.
And I just want to, again, thank you guys for a very insightful, rewarding panel, because sometimes they get perfunctory and it's like, dress for success and, look good and have a firm handshake. And this has been very valuable. I'm sure everyone on the call would agree. I'm Andrew Gardiner. I'm on LinkedIn as well. And my feedback for everybody is just to pile on with what everybody said, but namely what you said, Phil, about just be positive. It's not fair, but it's not fair for everybody. And that makes it fair. So if you can just weather that storm and keep showing up, you'd be shocked at what happens. And I think everybody on the panel would agree with that. Okay, everybody, there's a recording of this call. I'll send that to you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the Tuesday, and there'll be 2 more sessions tomorrow with different panelists. And thanks again to Whitty for making this possible.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Enjoy the
Hi,
conference.
everyone. Thanks so much.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you, Andrew. Nice
Of course.
to meet everyone. Bye.
Thank you.